K'Andre Miller gets brutally honest about his own play, then turns in a strong effort in the Rangers' 2-1 win over the Senators. We talk about Miller's comments, Igor Shesterkin standing on his head, and new line combinations at practice.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1174 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers last night turning in a 2-1 victory against the Ottawa Senators, a game in which, to me, it's the classic case of a team playing just as well as it needs to, rather than as well as it can. They got the win. That's what really counts. It's another 2 points. Obviously, we're still pretty early in the season. You want to stack as many points as you possibly can, especially in the Metro Division, which once again looks strong this year after what was maybe a little bit of a down year last year, relative to how the Metro usually does. It's looking like a very strong division this year. So every win is big, every point is big, and the Rangers got 2, and that's what really counts. There were certainly some things to nitpick in this one, though. And I wanted to start off today's episode by talking a little bit about K'Andre Miller, because there was a story from friend of the show, Vince Mercogliano. He talked to K'Andre Miller a little bit before this most recent game here against the Senators. And Miller essentially took some responsibility, took some accountability for how he had played thus far in the season. And for Miller, I think it's been a little bit of a mixed bag this year. I don't think it's been all bad. He's had some good games. He's had some shaky games as well. And I think, like a lot of players on the Rangers, his most recent game against the Capitals was probably his worst game of the season. Him and Adam Fox just did not have it that night. Miller made a couple of mistakes, 2 of which led pretty much directly to goals for the Washington Capitals. But after that game, the practice after that game against the Capitals, what happened was K'Andre Miller stayed on the ice for quite a bit longer than any of his teammates, was just kind of working on some things. And then per the Vince Mercogliano story, this is what K'Andre Miller had to say following that practice session. Personally, I've got to be better. I was not on top of my game. That was something I kind of wanted to come in for today's practice and really focus in and just prepare myself for the next game. And of course, once again, for frame of reference, this happened after the loss against the Capitals, but before this win against the Senators. And then K'Andre Miller also went on to say, one of the things that I don't lean on enough, but that I have in my back pocket if I need it, is my quick defensive instincts. When something does break down, just getting back defensively and making sure we're covering for each other and having each other's back when one of us is jumping into play. And there was actually a really good example of K'Andre Miller doing exactly that in this game here against the Senators. A really impressive defensive play where basically he was just busting his tail to get back, get in position, and break up a rush. We'll get to some of Miller's highlights in just a second here. But I do like hearing Miller talk like this because accountability, right? This is something that we talked about 2 episodes ago, maybe 3 episodes ago, whatever it was, when we were talking about Mika Zibanejad and how he had played recently and some kind of eyebrow-raising comments that he made when he was asked about how he felt about losing a little bit of ice time. And, the thing that kind of stood out from those comments, and I don't think Mika means it this way, but there is something that kind of comes through with these quotes where it seems like it's a little bit of a lack of accountability. And that was nowhere to be found here for Miller. Miller took full responsibility. He owned it. I was not good enough. I have to be better. And then just as impressively, he indeed was better in this game here against the Ottawa Senators. As far as like Miller's numbers from this game, he was a +1, had 22 minutes and 29 seconds of ice time. That was second on the Rangers among defensemen. Surprise, surprise. Adam Fox led the way there. Miller also had a shot on goal and blocked 4 shots, which is obviously fantastic to see as well. And he also had 47 seconds on the power play and 3:31 while the Rangers were shorthanded. And if I'm remembering correctly, obviously Miller was a +1. I believe he was also on the ice when the Rangers scored their power play goal. Now, obviously, when you score on the power play, you don't get a plus for that. But if he was a +1, then that would mean that he was out there for the even strength goal that the Rangers scored. And yeah, I mean, the power play goal was scored by Lafreniere, so that was the second unit. I'm pretty sure Miller was on the ice by then. So good things happening with K'Andre Miller on the ice. But yeah, overall, kind of a little bit of a roller coaster for me, or excuse me, well, for Mika too, but for right here, for K'Andre Miller, a little bit of a roller coaster so far this season. Obviously started the year with Adam Fox. It's the first time that we had really seen the two of them as, mates, defensive mates to start the season. We'd seen it maybe in little bits and pieces over the years before we saw it to start this season, but never with any real regularity. It seemed to be working for a while. And then, as I mentioned, that brutal game, not just for Miller and Fox, but really just about the entire Rangers team against the Capitals. And they switched defense pairings during that game. But then for this game, they went back to what they had been going with before that. They had K'Andre Miller back out there with Adam Fox. Lindgren was back with Trouba, and Mancini was with Schneider. But Miller was much better in this game, a lot more noticeable, and in a good way this time. There was a play early in this game where he was in on the rush. His shot got blocked, and this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the play that I mentioned earlier. Shot was blocked, and then he just busts his tail to get back on defense and is able to poke the puck away from Brady Tkachuk when, Tkachuk, he's entering the zone with a full head of speed, and we know he's not the kind of player that's going to shy away from getting to the front of the net, and Miller made sure that did not happen. There was also a really nice play a little bit later where he stayed with Drake Matheson, an up-and-coming player for the Senators along the boards, was able to get the puck away from him. And I mentioned penalty killing earlier, and the Rangers took 5 penalties in this game. Senators got 5 power play opportunities. The biggest reason why the Rangers killed all 5 of those power play opportunities for the Senators was, of course, Igor Shesterkin, but everybody had a hand in it, including K'Andre Miller. There were some really good kills by the Rangers in this game. And there was one play with Miller when the Rangers were shorthanded where Rangers couldn't get the puck out of the zone. It looked like it was going to come out. The Senators took it back. And then there's a pass from one side of the net to the other. And as good as Igor Shesterkin was in this game, if this pass is completed, I think there's a very good chance that the Senators are going to finish their opportunity and they're going to score a goal here. But Mika Zibanejad, why do I keep doing that? K'Andre Miller made sure that it did not happen, and he reached out with his stick and poked the puck away. He ever so slightly just grazed the puck, and they weren't sure. Sam and Joe were watching the replay, and you couldn't really tell if he had touched the puck or not. When you look at it really slowly, just ever so slightly, the very tip of K'Andre Miller's stick got a piece of the puck and redirected the puck ever so slightly away from the player that it was going to. And once that happened, it pretty much meant that the Senators were not going to be able to score on this specific opportunity here. But, a little bit of more snarl from Miller as well. There was a play where Greg was kind of in the crease, and he didn't really do that much, but K'Andre Miller moved him out of there. One thing I've noticed about K'Andre Miller, because when it comes to physicality, when it comes to the snarl on the edge, that stuff seems to come and go a little bit with Miller and with his game. But one thing that'll get him going, he does not let you mess with his goalie. That's one thing I've kind of picked up on over the years. There was an incident last year where somebody kind of accidentally on purpose fell on Jonathan Quick, and he was all over them. And even here, just making sure that nothing went down between anybody on the Senators and Igor Shesterkin. He's very quick to step between a player and his goalie. So that's nice to see as well. One other thing that I want to mention here, because there's always some discourse on social media about what the Rangers are going to do next and who's going to be here for the long haul and who should be extended and who should be traded and who should be allowed to walk in free agency. I do see certain Ranger fans saying that, well, maybe you trade K'Andre Miller after the season. I'm not going to act like that's the craziest idea that I've ever heard. That's something that's certainly not impossible, but I would not do it, and I'm not looking for the Rangers to do it either. I don't think they're going to end up doing it for a few reasons. To begin with, Miller is in the final year of his 2-year bridge deal that's paying him $3.87 million per year. I think that's a reasonable price. He'll get a little bit of a bump there, but I think that's reasonable as well. He's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights after this season is over. He's still only going to be 25 when that happens and still 3 years away from being a UFA. But Miller, for the most part, has been a solid player for this team. He's been a part of a lot of winning here. And look at the other players on the Ranger blue line right now. Adam Fox is the only player that is signed after next season. And on top of that, I think there's a very good chance that 2 mainstays in this New York Ranger defenseman group are very likely going to be on their way after this season ends. And there's varying opinions on both of these guys, Jacob Trouba and Ryan Lindgren. But the bottom line, however you feel about either one of these players, this cannot be denied. The 2 of them have almost exclusively playing the Rangers top 4 for the past 3 or 4 seasons now. And the Rangers have been a very, very successful team in that time, winning a ton of games and, obviously making a couple of deep runs in the playoffs as well. But you look at Ryan Lindgren, the negotiations this offseason and which way is it going to go, and long-term, short-term bridge deal, what's it going to be? They end up doing the 1-year deal for $4.5 million. Rangers are hesitant to go long-term with Ryan Lindgren, and you can understand why. To me, it feels like the writing is on the wall, especially with the emergence of somebody like Victor Mancini, that Ryan Lindgren will be gone after this season. So if he's out of the picture, and we'll debate that in greater detail in a future episode, but if he's out of the picture and then Jacob Trouba is also gone, which I think he will be, I think the only way Jacob Trouba saves himself and gets to play out the final year of his deal next year is if the Rangers win the Stanley Cup. Maybe making it to the finals would be enough to get him back, but I think one way or another, you're going to need that cap space to do some other things, and you just can't afford to pay Jacob Trouba $8 million a season anymore. So I think after this year, Trouba either gets traded, he gets waived, he gets bought out. One way or another, they're going to make a move with Jacob Trouba that saves themselves some money. So I think they'll both be gone. I mean, do you really want to lose both of them and K'Andre Miller? I mean, you could, I guess. There's nothing that says you can't do that. But, man, you are a Stanley Cup contending team, and you're going to just massively overhaul your blue line. Again, you could do it, but that could get a little bit dicey, and that's a classic case of be careful what you wish for, because you never know. You bring in a new player with a trade, this guy with free agency, you call this guy up from the minors. These guys may or may not work out. You never know for sure. So we'll see how it goes. But even somebody like Zach Jones at the end of this year, he's an RFA with arbitration rights. So, for me, there's a lot of uncertainty among Ranger defensemen. And with that being the case, and with the, really likelihood that Lindgren and Trouba will both be playing elsewhere next year, I think you keep K'Andre Miller around. I wouldn't even rule out the idea of a possible in-season extension for K'Andre Miller, but we'll see. And obviously, if that does happen, we'll talk about it when it happens. But a really nice bounce-back performance from K'Andre Miller in this game. Got to keep everything rolling just a second. We're going to talk about whether the Rangers should give a blank check to Igor Shesterkin after just a phenomenal performance against the Senators. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate is not to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's go and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys for being part of the roller coaster that is New York Ranger hockey on this podcast, your team every day. Rangers, in our next episode, we're going to be discussing their game against the Islanders. They play host to the 4-5-2 Islanders on Sunday at 1. So obviously cover everything that happens in that game in the next episode. For the time being, though, let's talk about Igor Shesterkin. Are we ready to just give him a blank check? Should we do that? Should we just pay him whatever he wants to keep him as a New York Ranger for the next 7 years, the next 8 years, whatever it might be? I'm exaggerating to make the point a little bit. And there is that part of me that's hoping that the Rangers will win this staring contest, because I think that sooner or later a deal probably will get done. But I feel like also from both sides, there's no real rush to get it done. Igor knows that the longer he drags this thing out and the closer he gets to free agency, the more pressure it puts on the Rangers. And from the Rangers' perspective, they look at Igor and they look at what other elite goalies in the NHL are making. And I'd put Igor above, pretty much all of them. But, everybody else, all the other elite goalies, it's like $8 million a year or 8.25 a year or $8.5 million a season. So for Igor to say no to 8 years and $11 million per year, I mean, we've been through this. We know we've kind of gone back and forth on this whole thing here. But from the Rangers' perspective, I don't think that they see a reason that they should have to go any higher. So the staring contest continues. But for one game last night, I mean, he's played good all season. He's been great. He's been fantastic. He's been Igor Shesterkin. But this game in particular, I got to think his best performance of the season. The Senators were basically skating circles around the Rangers for the final 2 periods of this game. Outchanced them, outpossessed them, outshot them, probably out-hustled them a little bit, pretty much out-everythinged the New York Rangers. But that one constant for this team over the last, half decade here has been Igor Shesterkin, and he did his thing again, stopping 40 of the 41 shots that he faced. Even the one goal that he allowed, I think, was borderline unstoppable. Great play by the Senators. Kind of came out of nowhere. Just a great pass out of the corner and right to the doorstep there, and they were able to score and cut the Ranger lead down to 2-1. But Igor came up big with some saves down the stretch as well. He was robbing all of the Senators' big name players at least a couple of times each. He denied Giroux on the doorstep on the one play. I can remember Stützle, a rush into the zone. He was able to stop him as well. Stopped Tkachuk a couple times too, I believe. The Senators, now it's worth pointing this out. They did draw iron 3 times in this game. It was once in every period. You had them hitting the post, then hitting the crossbar, then hitting the post again. But as we know, any goalie will tell you that the post, that's part of the goalie equipment right there. So they don't count. Hey, they don't even count as shots on goal, right? So Igor getting a little help from the iron, but he was obviously fantastic in this game. I'm not going to go through every single Igor save that he made, but there's 2 that were both in the second period that I absolutely must highlight. First one was on a delayed penalty by the Rangers, and this is the one I was talking about as far as him robbing Claude Giroux. Igor is down on his stomach. He fully extends his glove upward and just snags a point-blank shot by Giroux to absolutely rob him. I would say this was his best save of the night. I don't say that lightly because there were some other gems as well. But then there was also this save in the second period. I don't think this one was as good, but this was his most unique save of the night. So the shot is put on net. He saves it. He gets a piece of it, does Igor Shesterkin. Puck is in the air, kind of fluttering there. You don't know where it's going to land. And Igor kind of drifts backwards, and while falling backwards, gets his glove on the puck and essentially just swats it out of the way. So one of the more unique saves that you'll see a goalie make. Igor just kind of improvising there, doing whatever he had to do to keep the puck out of the net. The Rangers were still up 2-0 at that point, but a big save by Igor Shesterkin. It's funny. We also, this is a big matchup that we had to watch in this game. The Senators power play against the Rangers penalty kill. We did the crossover episode before this game with Ross Leviton of Locked On Sens. Always a great time talking with Locked On Sens about anything. Whether they're, however these teams are doing, a pregame show, a postgame show, whatever it might be. But the Rangers shut down the Senators power play. But Igor Shesterkin, cliche or not, your goalie has to lead the way and be your best penalty killer. And he was able to do that, made a couple of nice saves while the Rangers are shorthanded. And the Senators ended up going 0 for 5 on the night on the power play. And that's Igor Shesterkin. He had as big of a reason to do with that as anything else. The Senators were at like 42% success rate coming into the game. So in a game where the Rangers were a little sloppy, probably even took a couple of unnecessary penalties, you need your goalie to step up. And Igor Shesterkin did that in a big-time way against a team that, do we call the Senators an elite power play unit? They've certainly played like it thus far in the season. That number will come back down to earth a little bit, but clearly this is a team that does have some firepower when it comes to the man advantage. And then there was the second period. This is when the Senators really kind of took over this game and really dominated, outshooting the Rangers. Again, like I said earlier, pretty much out everything the Rangers. Rangers had to kill off a couple of penalties in this period. The ice was absolutely tilted in Ottawa's favor. But again, the common denominator was Igor Shesterkin. And honestly, the third period wasn't a whole lot better for the Rangers. If you look at shots on goal in this game, the total is very lopsided. It was 41-18 in favor of the Senators. But if you look at the second and third periods combined, it was even worse. The Rangers actually outshot the Senators in the first period. The final 2 periods, the Senators outshot the Rangers 33-9. I mean, my God, you can't win a game like that without your goalie coming up huge. And that's obviously what we saw in this game. It also kind of begs the question of which goalie could, should, and will be back in the crease on Sunday against the Islanders. I'm kind of leaning toward Igor Shesterkin, And it seems like the Rangers might be doing that as well, because if you go on Daily Faceoff right now, they'll announce starting goalies once the teams announce it. Igor Shesterkin is listed as likely for the Rangers in that game. And the Islanders have already announced that they're going to go with Ilya Sorokin. It's a division matchup. It's a rivalry game. You probably want your top goalie out there for a game such as this. There is that little part of me, though, that feels like Igor Shesterkin maybe give him a little bit of a breather and also kind of challenge the Rangers a little bit by putting Quick out there. Now, Quick's been great. He's been great this season. He was fantastic last season as well. But there's a little bit less of a safety net when the backup goalie is in the net, and it kind of challenges the team to play better team defense, which I think the Rangers, they could use a challenge like that right about now. But even with that all being the case, I'm still going to go with Igor Shesterkin, even though Igor faced 41 shots against the Senators, faced 46 shots against the Capitals. Let's get Igor back out there for the rivalry game and see what he can do. So we'll see how it goes. I do think that if Igor plays this one, you'll probably see Quick in the next one. The next game after this isn't until Thursday. That's against the Sabres. I think one way or another, we'll see Quick in one of the next two games. But I think Igor will end up getting this one against the Islanders. But yeah, man, I mean, look, it's kind of it's a little bit of a mixed bag, because you don't want to have to lean on your goalie as much as the Rangers did in this game and put as much on his plate as they put on his plate and play as leaky of defense as they played. But with that being said, it's awesome to see Igor Shesterkin being Igor Shesterkin and doing what he can do and stealing a game for the New York Rangers. You look at Igor this season, 5-2-1, 225 goals against average, 931 save percentage. I mean, maybe those numbers come back to earth a little bit, but those are the kind of numbers we've seen him put up, pretty often, and certainly that year that he won the Vezina. So he's capable of playing this way. We'll see how it goes going forward. But man, what a reminder to all of us of just how important Igor Shesterkin truly is to this team. I know there's some people that have opinions on how much it should take and, you don't want to spend that much on a goalie and all this stuff. But Igor Shesterkin was, and will continue to be the backbone of this team for as long as he's on it. So hopefully that's many years past this one. But obviously that saga has still yet to play out. We'll see how it goes. In just a minute, we're going to talk about some new line combinations at practice. Mika Zibanejad has new line mates. And we'll talk about if it makes sense for the Rangers to be switching their lines at this juncture of the season. We're going to do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Built Rewards. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Okay, real talk. We've all been there, feeling like we're burning through cash with those rent checks. It's very frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel or anything else with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They are designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by paying rent right now when you join built.com/lockedonnhl. That's join built.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Join built.com/lockedonnhl. Start earning points with your rent payments today. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet they can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by discussing a couple of new line combinations that were unveiled at practice a little bit earlier here today. It is Saturday as I'm recording this. Now, of course, there are no guarantees that this is the line combinations that they're going to use in this next game against the Islanders, but the smart money is on them doing exactly that. I don't think you do this in a practice the day after a game, also the day before the next game, and then not use it in the following game. So I think for sure this is probably what we're going to see on Sunday afternoon against the Islanders. You've got a top line, or what's listed as the top line, but this one definitely is the top line of left to right, Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Alexis Lafreniere. This is a line combination that we've seen sparingly over the last couple of seasons. I think there's a lot of people that want to see it happen. These are the three kind of go-to forwards on this team right now. That's a line that has a chance to be electric. I like the fact that Lafreniere is still with Panarin. I wouldn't break those two up under, I don't think, just about any circumstances at this point. So that's your top line. You've got a second line. Now, this is the one that's been completely revamped. You've got three players playing together here that were on three different lines thus far this season. And from left to right, second line, Will Cooley in the top six, Vincent Trocheck, and Riley Smith. So Trocheck stays put, looking at past depth charts. Cooley moves up a spot. Riley Smith moves down a spot. Again, this is the line that is completely new. The thing that kind of jumps off the page for me is Will Cooley. I do believe this is the first time that we are seeing him in a top six role. Like, I'm trying to remember, did Will Cooley ever play with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider last year? I mean, just about every player on this team did at one time or another. So it's not hard for me to believe that that did happen. Maybe it was like a game or two and I just forgot about it. But as far as memory serves, without going back and looking through the depth chart of every single game last season, I want to say this is the first time that Will Cooley will start a game for the Rangers in the top six. So that's very interesting and very well deserved. This guy goes out there, brings it every night, plays such a physical brand of hockey, and plays hard every single night, and is really, given a boost to this Ranger team with the work that he's done with his fellow third liners, Filipino and Capo Caco thus far this season. The one downside to this is that line is at least somewhat broken up, but more on that in just a second. The third line is now going to be Chris Kreider, Filipino, Capo Caco from left to right. As far as Kreider moving from the first line down to the third line, it's fine. I don't really see this as like a serious like demotion or anything like that. Look, the Rangers have a good team. They have a deep team. And when you want to juggle the lines a little bit and you want to shuffle the deck a little bit and try some new line combinations, somebody is going to move down the lineup. And in this case, it just happens to be Chris Kreider. Very curious to see how this goes. I do like that they're at least keeping Hedl and Kako together. But my least favorite part of this new, combination of lines here is that they have now broken up Cooley, Hedl, and Kako. Again, Hedl and Kako is still together, but that line has been so much fun this season. The three of them have played so well together. They play so hard on every shift. They've generated some offense. More importantly, they've been a complete shutdown line. They have not allowed a goal against the entire season. That record is still intact for that trio. And I think all three of those guys, Cooley, Hedl, and Kako, you can really make the argument that all three of those players are playing the best hockey that they've ever played since joining the Rangers. Now, of course, Cooley, he's at the start of his second season, so that's not that big of a deal, really. But Kako, I mean, we know how up and down he's been, and Filipino struggling with the injuries, some inconsistency. He's been looking like one of the Rangers' best all-around players so far this season. That, to me, doesn't sound like a line that you really want to break up. But I guess, when you look at what's been happening lately, if Laviolette feels like a change has to be made, then that's the one unfortunate side effect of it, at least for me. That's the only thing that I'm not really feeling about these new line combinations, is now that line has to be broken up. And then, of course, the fourth line, I guess one semi-surprise here. Adam Edstrom, Sam Carrick, those two have been there all season. And now Jimmy Vesey on the right wing. It looks like he's going to be back. He was placed on LTIR, and when that happens, you have to miss a minimum of 10 games. This most recent game was Vesey's 10th game miss, so he's now eligible to return, and it sounds like he's probably going to be out there on this line. In addition to that, Matt Rempe, hot off the presses, sent back down to the Hartford Wolfpack, which I think is a good thing, too. If he's not going to play, then he's got to be playing for the Wolfpack and developing his game. So, like I said, mixed feelings on the new line combos. I get where they're coming from. When you look at what the Rangers have done recently, it's not really that good from an offensive perspective. In their last 4 games, they're 2-2, which is fine. I mean, you're going to go through a couple stretches where you go 2-2 over the course of 4 games. I don't think it's really a problem. But when you look at the most recent 5 games that the Rangers have played, From most recent to least recent, they've been outshot in, I believe, all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Four straight games they've been outshot. So against the Senators, outshot 41-18. Against the Caps, outshot 46-19. Against the Ducks, outshot 33-32. So it's close, but they still got outshot. And before that, 29-25, outshot by the Florida Panthers. So they're not creating enough scoring opportunities, not getting enough pucks at the net. And on top of that, in the last 4 games combined, the Rangers have scored a grand total of only 8 goals. So 2 goals per game. And, we're used to seeing this team do a lot more offensively. Obviously, no team in the NHL is above a stretch like this, but they're going through a little bit of a drought as far as offense is concerned. And Peter Laviolette and the coaching staff are reacting to it. And I don't really blame them for doing that. Sometimes these kinds of moves are necessary. And obviously, they feel like that's the case for this game. I do like the way Mika Zibanejad played in this last game, though, because we've kind of been on him a little bit, but he played very well. There was one play that really kind of embodied, I think, how Mika Zibanejad did in this game. Rangers were up 2-1. There's about like 3 or 4 minutes to go, somewhere in that vicinity, and Riley Smith is able to clear the puck out of the Rangers zone, down the ice. It's looking like it might be an icing, but then as you watch it, you start to realize, okay, that puck is going to run out of steam, and the Rangers are going to be able to get there. So Mika's going to get the puck, and he's flying. He's absolutely flying up the ice to try to get it. The puck is heading into the corner there. He's got a defenseman closing in on him as well, and he can see to his left, he's got Chris Kreider going to the net. So what does Mika do? He dives. He lays out across the ice, full extension of his stick, and knocks the puck to his left in the direction of Chris Kreider. Now, he wasn't quite able to complete this pass, but that's almost irrelevant to me. The bottom line, that's an effort play. That is a big-time, serious effort play, given everything you've got from Mika Zibanejad there, and that's what we need to see more of. And that play was the one that stood out to me more than anything else, but in general, Mika just had more jump, more energy. Obviously, he played a big role in the penalty killing as well, so that's nice to see. I thought that line looked better right from the opening shift of the game, and you hope that there's more of that to come for Mika Zibanejad. I mean, now he is getting broken up from his 2 line mates, but he's also getting to play with Panarin and Lafreniere, who've been the Rangers' 2 best forwards thus far this season. So that should be a good situation for Mika. And like I said, we hope it gets him going at least a little bit. Very curious to see how they handle the line combinations going forward. You can experiment with this for a game and then go back to the old combos if it's not working. They got some options, and that's always a nice thing as well. But we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.